Hi, this is Miss Merced, and I'm going to go over multiplying and dividing imaginary numbers. Just as a reminder, I equals the square root of -1, and when you square I, you end up canceling out the square root, and then you just have -1. So here's our example. We are going to multiply this term with this binomial here. The first thing you want to do is distribute the 3i to both terms. So you're going to have 3i, let's see, times -5 plus 3i times +2i. This is one way to write it, or you can just straight do it. And then 3i times -5 is -15i. We are only multiplying the real numbers together. And then here, it's 3 times 2, which is 6. And then I times I, it's just multiplying two variables, is I squared. So then I squared. Okay? What's important here to know is that because it's I squared, and we just talked about how I is square root -1, I squared is like saying I times I, which I just literally stated, which is like saying square root -1 times square root -1. And we can, since they're both repeating, we can write it as one thing with a square. And then a square and a square root cancel each other out, and then you only have -1. So ultimately, this I squared is going to be replaced with -1. So let's go ahead and write that in. -15i plus 6. It's very important to just keep rewriting. It keeps it neat and organized. -1. Then we have -15i. 6 times -1 is -6. The last thing I would only suggest to do is we usually I have our real numbers up front and our imaginary numbers in the back. So let's go ahead and rewrite this as -6 minus 15i. And that is our final answer for this multiplication problem that we just did. Okay? Let's go ahead and try another multiplication problem that is a step up from this one. So the problem is 4 times 3i. I messed that up. So the problem is 4 plus 3i times -1 minus 2i. So we have two binomials here, and we're just going to FOIL or kind of use the distributive properties stuff we've done before. So FOIL would be multiply the first with the first. So 4 times -1 is -4. First with the two outsides is the O, so that's -8i. 4 times -2 is -8i. Then the two insides, so 3 times -1 is -3, and then we have the I, and then the two last ones. 3 times -2 is -6, and then I times I is I squared. We want to combine like terms. I can only combine I with I. The I squared is considered its own separate term. It cannot be combined with the individual i's here. So we have -4, and then -8 minus 3 is -11i, and then -6i squared. Now remember, we just said I squared equals -1. So it's very important that you just kind of memorize that. Whenever you see an I squared, that's -1. So let's go ahead and rewrite this again. -4 minus 11i minus 6 times -1. And then let's go ahead and rewrite it. -4 minus 11i. -6 times -1 is +6. and then combine like terms. I can combine 6 and negative 4 with each other. That would be, let's just write it together. You don't have to do all these steps, but I'm just showing you a very organized manner. If you want to skip that and you just want to say negative 4 plus 6 is 2 and skip this piece, you're more than welcome to skip that piece. Either way, this is our final answer when we simplify it. 2 minus 11i. I'm going to go ahead and do another example just to make sure that we understand. So let's go ahead and try this one out. The problem is negative 6 plus I, and then negative 6 minus I. And this is a good example. This is multiplying. So here's another good example. And let's go ahead and multiply it out. So we're going to FOIL. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. Negative 6 times negative 1 is positive 6i. Positive I times negative 6 is negative 6i. Positive I times negative I is negative I squared. This is very important to see, and you might have noticed it in previous problems with real numbers. When you have the exact same numbers and letters listed twice, but maybe with an opposite sign between them, they actually cancel each other out. 6i minus 6i cancels each other out. And the only thing we have is 36 minus I squared. Like we stated before, we know that I squared equals negative 1. So I'm going to rewrite this minus negative 1. It's very important to understand that this minus sign is different from the negative 1 that we just pulled in. So now when you subtract a negative sign, it is like adding. So our final answer is 37. So this is how we get to the final answer.